When we look at the Earth from space, at the iconic images like NASA's The Blue Marble, we are often struck by a profound sense of vitality. We see the deep blues of the oceans, the swirling whites of the clouds, and vast, reassuring patches of green. We are told this is the green of life, of continents teeming with forests, the planet's lungs breathing in and out. It's an image of robust, wild, and enduring nature. But a difficult question begins to form if you look a little closer, not at the image itself, but at the data behind it. What if that sweeping green is not what we think it is? What if it's an illusion, a form of green noise that masks a much more complicated and perhaps unsettling reality? This isn't to suggest the photographs are fake. It is to question our interpretation. We see green and our minds automatically populate that color with images of ancient, complex ecosystems. Towering trees, a dense understory of ferns and fungi, the sounds of birds and insects, the damp smell of decaying leaves creating new soil. We imagine a forest, but the satellite's lens is not so romantic. It registers chlorophyll. It registers a certain density of plant cover. It cannot distinguish between a 1,000-year-old, biodiverse rainforest and a 20-year-old commercial plantation of eucalyptus trees, planted in perfect, sterile rows. To the satellite, both are simply green. This is the starting point of our investigation. The possibility that the image of a green, forested planet that lives in our collective consciousness is profoundly misleading. It could be that we are looking at a map where the territory has been fundamentally altered, but the map's colors remain the same. We are potentially misreading the signs, mistaking the symptom of managed, simplified greenery for the health of a complex living organism. The central question, then, is not whether the Earth is green, but what kind of green it is. Could it be that we have been systematically taught, through language, policy, and economics, to accept a simplified, hollowed-out version of a forest, and in the process, we have been made to forget what a real one even is? This is not a search for a culprit, but an exploration of a process, a slow, quiet, and global shift in perception that has left us staring at the ghost of a forest and calling it a tree. To understand how this perceptual shift might have happened, we need to examine the language we use. Words shape our reality, and perhaps no word has been more influential in our modern relationship with forests than sustainability. Today we hear it and think of ecology, of environmental protection, of harmony with nature. But it's worth considering the word's origins, which are far more pragmatic and economic than ecological. The term, as we use it, is a direct translation of the German Naturalität. It was first formally articulated in the early 18th century by a man named Hans Karl von Karlowitz, a mining administrator in Saxony. His problem was not biodiversity or ecosystem collapse, it was a looming timber shortage. The silver mines, the engine of the region's economy, required vast amounts of wood for construction and fuel. The forests were being clear-felled at an alarming rate, and he foresaw a future where the industry would grind to a halt. His solution, Naturalität, was a revolutionary economic principle for its time. It simply stated that one should never harvest more wood than the forest can regrow. It was a principle of sustained yield. The forest was viewed as a natural resource, an asset that, if managed correctly, could provide a perpetual output. It was an idea born of accounting, not of biology. The goal was to ensure the continuous production of a single commodity, wood. The multitude of other functions a forest performs, creating soil, regulating water, housing millions of species, sequestering carbon in complex ways, were not part of this equation. They were externalities, invisible to the ledger book. One has to wonder then, what happened when this purely economic concept was eventually adopted by the global environmental movement? Did the underlying logic change, or was it simply given a new, greener-sounding name? It's as if the operating system designed for a lumber mill was installed onto a living planet. The focus remained on yield, stock, and management. This way of thinking frames the forest not as a self-willed, sovereign entity, a complex adaptive system, but as a slow-growing farm, a place to be cultivated for human use. This linguistic and conceptual framework subtly, perhaps unintentionally, demoted the forest from a living community to a mere collection of resources. It gave us the tools to talk about managing nature, but it may have cost us the language to simply listen to it. If language provides the framework, then official definitions build the walls of our perception. And in 1992, a definition was formalized by the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO of the United Nations, that arguably did more to obscure the state of the world's forests than any single act of deforestation. The definition, which is now widely used for international reporting and climate agreements, is deceptively simple. A forest is an area of land of more than 0.5 hectares, with trees higher than 5 meters and a canopy cover of more than 10%. Later variations included land with younger trees that are expected to reach these thresholds. On the surface, it seems reasonable, but its logic is broken because it is entirely structural, not biological or functional. Consider the implications. A pristine, old-growth Amazonian rainforest with its millions of interdependent species and millennia of accumulated complexity is a forest. A vast, single-species plantation of fast-growing pine trees in South Africa, planted in geometric rows, regularly sprayed with pesticides and herbicides that eliminate all other life, and clear-cut every 30 years, is also, by this definition, a forest. A recovering patch of diverse, native woodland is a forest. A monoculture of eucalyptus saplings in India, which can lower the water table and acidify the soil, is also a forest. The definition makes no distinction. It is blind to biodiversity, to age, to ecological function, to resilience, to its role in the community of life. This is the event as erasure. It's a bureaucratic act that wipes away the very meaning of the word forest. This way of thinking had already been put into practice long before. In 18th and 19th century Germany, the messy, unproductive, mixed deciduous forests were systematically replaced with orderly, fast-growing spruce and pine monoculture. They were easier to count, easier to manage, easier to harvest. They were a forester's dream and an accountant's delight. The same pattern was repeated in the United States and across the world. Natural complexity was replaced with engineered simplicity. But what is lost when a forest is reduced to the status of a crop? The age difference is crucial. A managed tree plantation operates on a cycle of perhaps 20 to 80 years. A true forest ecosystem takes 800 years or more to reach maturity. We have replaced a slow, wise, and ancient organism with a fleeting, simple, and profitable harvest. Under the neutralizing logic of the official definition, this catastrophic replacement can even be reported as a net gain in forest area. When we zoom out from the definitions and the specific examples, a global pattern emerges, one of immense and almost incomprehensible loss. A study published in the journal Nature estimated that since the dawn of human civilization, the planet has lost 46% of its trees. Nearly half of the global forest that existed before us is simply gone. This is a staggering figure, but even it doesn't tell the full story. The more pressing issue might be the quality, not just the quantity, of what remains. The vast majority of the world's remaining forests are not the primary, old-growth ecosystems they once were. They are secondary forests, regrowing on previously cleared land, or they are heavily managed and degraded woodlands. They are in many ways mere silhouettes of their former selves. This is where a psychological phenomenon known as shifting baseline syndrome becomes critically important. Each generation accepts the state of the environment they are born into as normal. Our grandparents might remember rivers full of fish, but if we grew up with polluted rivers, we accept that as the baseline. Our children, in turn, will accept an even more degraded state as their normal. Applied to forests, this means we have collectively forgotten what a truly healthy, mature forest looks and feels like. We walk through a 50-year-old managed woodland with a single dominant tree species and a quiet, sparse undergrowth, and we think, this is a beautiful forest. We have no sensory memory of the deep, complex, multi-layered, noisy, and profoundly alive reality of a primary forest. We have lost the reference point. This collective amnesia is validated by data. According to a rigorous 2020 study, only about 3% of the world's terrestrial surface remains ecologically intact, meaning it has undisturbed habitat and healthy populations of all its original animal species. 3%. The rest of the planet's land, including most of what we call forests, has been altered, simplified, and emptied out. So when we see those green patches from space, it is plausible that we are not seeing a world of thriving forests, but a world of tree-covered landscapes that have had their intricate ecological machinery removed. We are looking at the shell, the structure, long after the life force within it has been diminished. The pattern is not just one of cutting trees down. It's a pattern of hollowing them out from the inside, leaving a green facade that we no longer have the memory to question. The redefinition of the forest is not just an academic or bureaucratic exercise. It creates a powerful legal and economic fiction that has profound real-world consequences. When a palm oil plantation in Borneo, which requires the clearing of one of the most biodiverse rainforests on Earth, can be legally classified and counted in statistics as a forested area, the entire system of environmental accounting becomes a farce. It allows corporations and governments to claim they are engaging in reforestation, or zero net deforestation, while in reality, they are replacing a vibrant, unique, and irreplaceable ecosystem with a sterile monocultural biological desert. This is not reforestation. It is the replacement of a living system with a green factory. This fiction is incredibly convenient for a global economy predicated on growth and resource extraction. It allows for the creation of complex financial instruments like carbon credits. A company can offset its pollution by paying for the planting of a forest elsewhere. But if that forest is just a plantation of non-native, fast-growing trees, what is actually being achieved? The spreadsheet shows that a certain number of tons of carbon will be sequestered. The numbers balance. The legal obligations are met, but the biological reality is a travesty. The soil may be degraded, the local water cycle disrupted, the native pollinators and seed dispersers who co-evolved with the original forest are left with nothing. The entire web of life is torn apart, but because the new plantation meets the simplistic, structural definition of a forest, the transaction is considered a success. We have in essence created a parallel reality. There is the Earth as it actually is, a complex, interconnected system of living beings. And then there is the Earth as it is represented on balance sheets, in policy documents, and in legal definitions. The tragedy is that we have begun to govern and manage the former based on the distorted logic of the latter. Ancient organisms, symbiotic relationships between fungi and roots that have existed for millions of years, and the genetic library of life itself have been reduced to externalities. They are inconvenient details in a system designed to measure one thing: the efficient production of commodities. The forest has been turned into a ghost in its own home, legally present but biologically absent. In the end, perhaps the most fitting way to understand this process is through a metaphor of a machine. An old-growth forest is not a collection of individual trees. It is a single, vast, and astonishingly complex biological mechanism. It has evolved over millennia to be a self-regulating, self-perpetuating system. The trees are just the most visible components, the large gears. But they are connected to millions of other parts. The mycorrhizal fungi in the soil that act as a nutrient-trading network, the insects that perform pollination, the predators that control herbivore populations, the bacteria that fix nitrogen, the canopy structure that regulates temperature and humidity. Every part is essential for the machine to function correctly. What we have done under the guiding principles of economic efficiency and simplification is to dismantle this intricate machine. We looked at the magnificent, ancient clockwork and decided that we were only interested in the brass from the mainsprings, the timber. So we broke the machine apart, discarded the countless, unnecessary cogs and levers, and melted down the spring. Then, realizing we still needed something that looked like a machine, we took a few of the simplest gears, the fastest-growing tree species, and arranged them in neat, straight lines. We have replaced the complex, self-winding clock with a cheap, battery-operated imitation. From a distance, it still has gears and tells a kind of time, but it is a fragile, simplistic, and lifeless construct. It no longer participates in the deeper cycles of the world. This leads us to the final, sobering thought. We now look upon the ruins of nature much like a tourist looks upon the ruins of a Roman aqueduct. We admire the remaining structure, the stones and arches that have survived. We see the grandeur of what was, but we forget its purpose. The water no longer flows. The aqueduct no longer carries life to the city. In the same way we walk through our modern, managed forests. The trees, the stones of the system are there. But the invisible flow of life, the complex interplay of a million species, the ecological water, has largely ceased. We are looking at a magnificent ruin, a relic of a world we have forgotten how to see, let alone rebuild. The green we see from space might not be the color of life, but the color of a beautiful, silent monument to a system we have disassembled without ever fully understanding it.